It still hurts when I think about that night. The night my own family looked at me like I was nothing. The night my son-in-law, Eric, said the words I never thought I'd hear from someone I once called family. "There's no room for you here." It plays in my head like an echo that refuses to fade. Thanksgiving, a day that once meant laughter, warmth, and the smell of roasted turkey filling every corner of our little home. I used to spend weeks planning it when my husband George was alive. The kids would come running through the door, their faces red from the cold, their arms full of pie boxes and gifts. We'd eat until midnight, telling old stories, laughing until tears rolled down our cheeks. But that was years ago. Now George is gone, and my daughter Lena doesn't call as often. Still, I told myself not to overthink it. Families drift. Life gets busy. I believed this Thanksgiving would be like old times, a chance to feel close again. So, I spent the day preparing. I made my famous pumpkin pie, the one George loved. I packed up gifts for the grandkids, soft sweaters, little toy cars, and a handmade scarf for Lena. It took me hours to wrap them just right. When the evening came, I looked in the mirror and tried to smooth out the wrinkles in my dress. My hair had gone mostly silver now, and there were dark circles under my eyes. But I smiled anyway. "You still look decent, Maggie," I whispered to myself. "You're going to see your family." I walked out into the cold, carrying a basket full of love, even if no one saw it that way anymore. The drive to Lena's new house was long. She and Eric had moved into a big place last year, just outside the city, a white, two-story house with fancy lights along the roof. I remember how proud she sounded when she told me, "Mom, it's our dream home," she'd said. I was happy for her then. I never imagined that same house would be where my heart broke. When I arrived, the driveway was full. Cars lined up, lights glowing through the windows. I could see silhouettes inside, people laughing, passing plates, wine glasses raised. My heart fluttered. They're all here already. I walked up to the front door and rang the bell, my hands trembling from the cold. It took a moment before the door opened. And then there he was, Eric. Standing tall, neat suit, that smug expression he always had when he thought he was better than someone. "Margaret," he said flatly, blocking the doorway, "what are you doing here?" For a second, I thought he was joking. I laughed nervously. "What am I doing here?" "Well, I was invited, wasn't I? It's Thanksgiving." His lips curled slightly. "Actually, there's been a change of plans." Behind him, I could hear voices, laughter, clinking glasses, children running. The smell of turkey and mashed potatoes hit me. My heart warmed for just a second. Then he said it. "There's no room for you here tonight." I blinked, sure I misheard. "What do you mean?" "There's always room for family." He raised a hand. "Lena didn't tell you. We've got a full house. Her co-workers, some friends from my office. It's a bit crowded." I stared at him. The cold air bit at my face, but my chest burned. "Eric," I said softly, "I brought dinner. The kids' presents." Look, Margaret," he cut me off. "We appreciate it, but we really don't have space. Maybe next time, okay?" Behind him, I saw Lena, my daughter. She was holding a tray of drinks. Her eyes met mine for a moment. I thought she'd rush over, tell him to stop, tell me to come in. But she didn't. She just looked away. I felt the world around me go quiet. The laughter inside faded to a hum. The smell of turkey suddenly made me sick. I stood there, holding that basket like an old fool. "Lena," I whispered. My voice cracked. She said nothing. She just turned back toward the dining room. And then Eric gently closed the door. Not slammed, not shouted, just closed, softly, like I was a stranger. The sound of that latch echoed louder than any scream. For a few seconds I stood there, staring at the door, hoping it would open again. It didn't. The cold started to seep into my bones. My hands were shaking so hard the pie almost slipped. I took a step back, then another. A neighbor walked by and looked at me, confusion in her eyes. I tried to smile, but it felt like my face had forgotten how. I made it back to my car somehow. I sat inside, the basket on my lap, and stared at the windshield. The frost was spreading across the glass, little veins of white crawling slowly like the numbness spreading inside me. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I just sat there frozen. After what felt like hours, I drove home. The city lights blurred through my tears. The radio played soft holiday music, the same songs George used to hum while carving the turkey. When I got home, the house was dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I placed the basket on the table, unwrapped one of the pies, and stared at it. The scent of cinnamon filled the air, warm and familiar. But this time it didn't comfort me. I poured myself a cup of tea. My hands were trembling so badly that some spilled onto the table. It was then that I saw the photo on the wall. George, Lena, and me, smiling in front of our old house. George's arm around both of us. Lena must have been 12. That was the year I baked my first pumpkin pie from scratch. He used to say, "No matter what happens, Maggie, family's your anchor. They keep you steady when the world tilts." But that night my anchor had cut me loose. I sat down at the kitchen table, the silence almost unbearable. Outside, the snow began to fall, thick and slow. The clock ticked each sound like a reminder that I was utterly alone. My phone buzzed once, a text. My heart jumped. Maybe it was Lena, maybe she changed her mind. But it wasn't. It was a message from a friend. She sent a link, a video. It was me standing at Lena's door, holding that basket, while Eric told me to leave. Someone had filmed it. The caption read, "Old woman kicked out of family dinner, heartless or justified." Hundreds of comments. Laughing emojis. People debating my worth. I dropped the phone. My chest hurt so bad it felt like something was breaking inside. I leaned back in my chair and let the tears fall hot, unstoppable, bitter. For hours I cried until my throat burned and my eyes swelled shut. But then, something inside me shifted. Somewhere between the hurt and the humiliation, a thought took root. Small at first, fragile but real. I looked at the photo of George again. His smile, his steady eyes. The kind of man who never let anyone take his dignity away. I wiped my tears and whispered, "They took my place at their table, but they'll never take my name from my house." That was the night the pain started to change. The night I stopped being a victim. Because when someone takes away your seat at their table, you build your own. And that's exactly what I was going to do. The morning after Thanksgiving felt like winter had moved inside my bones. I woke up with swollen eyes, the faint scent of cinnamon and cold tea still hanging in the kitchen. The untouched pie sat on the counter, its crust hard and dry now. It looked like a relic from a time that had ended. I sat at the table for a long time, staring at nothing, just listening to the refrigerator hum. The world outside was white, blanketed in snow, the kind that muffled sound and made everything look peaceful. But peace was the last thing I felt. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lena standing behind Eric holding that tray, watching him close the door in my face. She didn't say a word. I kept asking myself why. Had I done something wrong? Had I said something? Had I become too much of a burden for her? I raised her with everything I had. After George passed, I worked 2 jobs to help pay for her college. I sold my wedding ring so she could afford her first apartment. Every sacrifice I made was for her. And now she couldn't even open the door. I tried to shake it off, to convince myself that maybe Eric was right, maybe there really wasn't enough room, maybe it wasn't personal. But then I remembered that video, that humiliating video of me standing on their porch, broadcast for strangers to mock. I picked up my phone again. Thousands of views. People leaving comments. Probably one of those entitled old ladies. Looks like she deserved it. Can't blame the husband, maybe she's toxic. Each word felt like another knife twisting deeper. I shut off the phone. My hands were trembling. I wasn't angry yet, I was hollow, numb. Like all my emotions had been drained out, leaving only the ache. For the next few days, I didn't leave the house. I couldn't face anyone. I barely ate. My world had shrunk to the 4 walls around me, quiet, lonely, suffocating. On the 3rd day, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I saw my neighbor, Mrs. Whitaker, standing there. She was in her 70s, always kind, always nosy in the way only small-town neighbors can be. She held a casserole dish and looked at me with those pitying eyes. "Oh, Margaret, honey," she said softly. I saw what happened. Everyone's been talking about it. I wanted to slam the door. I didn't want anyone's pity, but I just didn't have the strength. She came in, set the dish down, and took one look at my face before shaking her head. "You don't deserve that. Not from your own family." Her words broke something in me. I sat down at the table, and before I knew it, Tears were streaming down my face again. "I raised her better than that," I whispered. "She wasn't always like this." Mrs. Whitaker reached across and took my hand. "Sometimes when people marry the wrong person, they change. Or maybe they get scared of standing up to the person they love. Either way, this isn't your fault." Her voice was kind, steady, the kind that made me feel seen for the first time in days. She stayed for an hour, maybe 2. When she left, she said something that stuck in my head. "Don't let them steal your grace, Margaret. You've still got your dignity. That's something they can't take unless you give it." That night, I sat in front of the fireplace with a cup of tea, replaying her words over and over. Your dignity. They can't take it unless you give it. It was strange, but for the first time since that night, something flickered inside me. A small flame. I turned on my laptop. I hadn't used it in months. I'd once run a small business, handmade crafts, vintage ornaments. People used to love my holiday pieces, especially during Thanksgiving and Christmas. I stopped after George died. It felt meaningless without him. But now, maybe it was time to start again. I stayed up until midnight, updating my old online shop, rewriting the descriptions, posting photos of my older pieces. My fingers felt stiff at first, but soon they found their rhythm again. I felt alive. When I finally went to bed, I whispered, "Tomorrow will be better." And in a way, it was. By the following week, my little online shop had its first few sales. People still loved the homemade charm of my work, the lace patterns, the carved wooden snowflakes George had once helped me design. For the first time in a long time, I smiled. A small smile, but real. Then came the message. It was from Lena. "Mom, I think we should talk." My heart leapt. I hadn't heard from her since that night. I waited a moment, trying to steady my hands before replying. "Of course, dear. I'd like that." She came over the next day. When I opened the door, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked tired, pale. Her eyes darted around like she was nervous. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I nodded. We sat in the living room. The silence between us was heavy. I could hear the ticking of the clock, the faint crackle from the fireplace. Finally, she spoke. "Mom, I'm sorry about Thanksgiving." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe she truly meant it. But something in her voice, the way her eyes didn't quite meet mine, told me there was more. She sighed. "Eric he thought it would be awkward with all his guests. You know how he is. He didn't mean to hurt you. He didn't mean to hurt me," I repeated softly. "Lena, he humiliated me. In front of your children. In front of strangers." She looked down. "I know. I told him it was wrong. But he's under a lot of stress lately. The promotion at work, the mortgage, I couldn't listen to another excuse." "Stop," I said firmly. "You're defending him." Her lips pressed together. "Mom, please, don't make this harder." "Harder?" I let out a bitter laugh. "You think I'm the one making it hard? You stood there, Lena. You saw him turn me away. You didn't say a word." Tears filled her eyes. For a moment, I saw the little girl she once was, the one who used to cling to my hand in crowded places, the one who cried when she scraped her knee. But that little girl was gone now. "I didn't know what to do," she whispered. "You could have said something," I replied. "Anything." The silence after that felt like a wall. She stood up, wiping her eyes. I just wanted to apologize. Before I could respond, she turned and left. When the door closed behind her, the flame inside me dimmed again. That night, I sat by the window, watching snowflakes drift under the streetlight. I thought about George again, what he would say if he saw how things had turned out. He used to tell me, "When people show you their colors, don't repaint them." Maybe I had been painting over Lena's and Eric's colors for too long, pretending they were still the family I remembered. The next day, I decided I needed to change something for me. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, rearranged furniture, opened the curtains wide. The light poured in like warmth I'd forgotten existed. As the days passed, more orders came in from my shop. A local boutique reached out, asking if I could make custom ornaments for their holiday display. I agreed. For the first time in years, I felt proud again, capable. Then, a few weeks later, something unexpected happened. I was coming home from the market when I saw a moving truck parked outside Lena's house. My heart clenched. Was she moving away? As I stood there watching, Eric came out carrying boxes. His face looked sour, impatient. Behind him, Lena followed holding one of the kids' backpacks. They looked tense like they'd been arguing. I ducked behind a tree, not wanting them to see me. I shouldn't have been there, but curiosity and worry got the better of me. A man in a dark coat was standing by the truck, the neighbor, I realized. I'd seen him before. Quiet, kind eyes. He said something to Lena, and she nodded. Eric turned sharply toward him, said something I couldn't hear, and stormed inside. The neighbor shook his head, clearly frustrated. For a brief second, Lena looked my way, and even though I was half hidden, I could see the shame in her eyes. Something told me that what happened on Thanksgiving was only the beginning, that there were things I didn't know. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not for me, not for Lena, and certainly not for Eric. Because the truth has a way of finding its way to the surface no matter how much people try to bury it. And I could feel it like the first crack of ice before a thaw. Something was coming. Something that would finally show me what really went on behind that closed door. The next few days passed in an odd blur. I tried to bury myself in work, pouring every ounce of energy into the little shop I had revived. Orders kept coming in, not many, but enough to keep me distracted. Still, even as my hands busied themselves with ribbons, glue, and wood polish, my mind kept wandering back to what I'd seen that day outside Lena's house. That neighbor, the man with the dark coat and steady eyes, the tension on Lena's face, Eric storming inside like he was holding something heavy, something deeper than just anger. I couldn't stop thinking about it. On the 5th day after that, I saw him again. I had just stepped out to get the mail when I heard someone call my name. Mrs. Graham. I turned around. It was him, the neighbor. He was standing on the sidewalk holding a small bag of groceries. His breath came out in little white clouds in the cold air. Yes, I replied, a little wary. He smiled politely but didn't step too close. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I think we should talk. My guard went up immediately. About what? He looked uncomfortable, glancing toward Lena's house down the street. About your daughter. About what's been happening. For a moment, I froze. My heart started to race, but I tried to keep my voice calm. You're her neighbor, right? He nodded. Yes, my name's Mark. I live right across the street. I studied him for a second. There was something genuine about his face, no hint of malice or curiosity, just quiet concern. What about my daughter? I asked slowly. He hesitated, lowering his voice. I don't want to cause any trouble, ma'am, but I think you deserve to know a few things. You've been through enough. He looked around, as if worried someone might be listening. Could we maybe talk somewhere private? I don't want the wrong ears picking this up. My stomach twisted with both fear and curiosity. I nodded. Come inside. We went into my house, the warmth of the fire meeting us as I closed the door. Mark set his groceries on the counter, still looking uneasy. He didn't sit right away. He just stood there, rubbing his gloved hands together like he was weighing what to say first. Before I tell you anything, he began, please understand I'm not trying to stir gossip. But what I saw that night, and what I've been hearing for months, it didn't sit right with me. He looked me straight in the eyes. That night on Thanksgiving you were kicked out, weren't you? The words hit like a sting. I nodded slowly. Yes, my son-in-law told me there was no room. And my daughter, she didn't stop him. Mark's expression darkened. I thought so. I saw it happen well, part of it. I was taking out the trash when I saw you standing there. You were holding that pie, right? My chest tightened. You saw that? He nodded grimly. And I saw Eric take his phone out. He filmed you. He laughed afterward, said something cruel. I didn't catch the words, but his tone... He trailed off, shaking his head. It wasn't right. I felt my throat close up. Even though I had already known about the video, hearing that someone had witnessed it, someone who had seen it through a stranger's eyes, made the shame return like a physical ache. He filmed it on purpose, I murmured, half to myself. Mark nodded. He did. And afterward, I overheard him on the phone bragging to someone about how he'd finally put you in your place. The room felt colder all of a sudden. My voice came out soft, trembling. Put me in my place? Mark's jaw clenched. Yes, I didn't understand at the time. But later, I started hearing things from the other neighbors. Apparently, Eric's been telling people that you're manipulative, that you interfere in their marriage, that you always ask for money. I stared at him, disbelief flooding through me. That's not true. I've never asked them for anything. I even lent them money when they bought that house." Mark sighed. "I know. I figured it wasn't true. You don't strike me as the type." But that's what he's been saying. And it's spread. Some of the neighbors believe it. I sank into the chair, my hands trembling. My own son-in-law had been spreading lies about me, painting me as some greedy, needy old woman. Mark's eyes softened. "I think Lena knows, but she's scared to stand up to him." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just betrayal, it was pity, wrapped in truth. "She used to be so strong," I whispered. "So sure of herself. Now she just follows him." Mark hesitated, then pulled out his phone. "I probably shouldn't show you this, but maybe you need to see it." He unlocked the screen and opened a video. The footage was shaky, filmed from his window across the street. It showed Lena and Eric arguing outside their house. Eric's voice was loud, sharp. "You're going to ruin everything if you keep talking to her." Lena's reply was muffled, but I could hear her crying. Eric stepped closer, jabbing a finger in her face. "She's poison, Lena. Do you understand? She doesn't care about us, she just wants to control you." Then he stormed back inside, slamming the door. Mark paused the video. "I'm sorry you had to see that, but I think you need to know how he talks about you when you're not there." I couldn't speak. I just sat there, my chest heaving, tears stinging my eyes. When I finally found my voice, it came out as a whisper. "Why are you telling me this?" He looked thoughtful. "Because I lost my mother last year. We didn't speak for months before she died, all because my ex-wife told me she was interfering. It wasn't true. I believed the wrong person. And I'll never forgive myself for it." The pain in his voice was real. That's what made me trust him. "I don't know what Eric's endgame is," he continued, "but I do know he's been planning something. He's been meeting people at odd hours, real estate agents mostly. I heard him say he was thinking about getting rid of the house." My pulse quickened. "Selling it?" He nodded. "Maybe. But here's the thing. The mortgage and part of the down payment are in your name, aren't they?" I froze. "How did you know that?" Mark gave a faint smile. "Small towns. People talk." I didn't answer. But he was right. When Lena and Eric bought the house, they couldn't afford the full down payment. I'd helped. I hadn't made a big deal out of it. I just wanted them to have a home. But now, if Eric was trying to sell it without my consent, that night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything Mark had said. The lies, the argument, the house. I stayed up late, digging through old folders, pulling out the documents from when the house was bought. The papers were all their signatures, agreements. My contribution had been officially recorded. If Eric was planning to sell it, he'd need my signature again. I thought about confronting Lena, but part of me knew she wouldn't believe me, not right away. Not while she was under Eric's shadow. The next morning, I decided to pay her a visit anyway. When she opened the door, her eyes widened. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I needed to talk," I said gently. She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. "Eric's not home." "Good," I replied. We sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I had once baked cookies with her when she was a child. Now it felt like foreign ground. I took a deep breath. "Lena, I need to ask you something. Has Eric said anything to you about selling the house?" Her face drained of color. "What? No. Why would you ask that?" "Because I heard he's been talking to agents," I said quietly. "And because part of this house legally belongs to me. I helped you buy it." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Then she looked away. "He wouldn't do that." "Lena," I said, leaning forward, "you saw what he did on Thanksgiving. You saw how he treats you. Don't tell me you still trust him completely." She rubbed her temples. "Mom, please don't make this harder. Eric's been stressed." He's lying to you," I interrupted. My voice broke slightly, but I didn't stop. "He's lying about me, too. He's been telling people I'm manipulative, that I ask you for money." "Is that what he told you too?" She blinked, startled. He said you were struggling, that you kept hinting for help." I didn't know what to think. I exhaled, heart heavy. "I never asked for anything, Lena. You know that." She didn't respond. Silence filled the kitchen thick, suffocating. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know who to believe anymore." I stood up slowly. "Believe what you see, not what you're told." Before she could reply, I walked out. That night, as snow began to fall again, I sat in my living room staring at the fire. My heart was torn between anger and sorrow. But one thing had become clear. Eric wasn't just cruel, he was calculating. And I wasn't going to sit quietly anymore. Mark's words echoed in my mind. Don't let them steal your grace. Grace didn't mean silence. Grace meant standing tall even when you'd been knocked down. So I made a plan. The next time I saw Eric, I wouldn't be standing on his porch as a humiliated guest. I'd be standing as a woman ready to take back her power and her dignity. When I got home that night, the house felt colder than usual. The shadows stretched long across the living room, the kind that seemed to whisper all the words people never said out loud. I dropped my coat on the couch, sat down, and just stared at the empty table where I used to host Thanksgiving dinners filled with laughter and love. Now, it was just silence, the kind that eats at you slowly. I couldn't stop replaying the moment in my head. The way Mark's voice had cut through the room. The sharp, dismissive tone when he told me to leave. The way everyone just stood there, frozen, pretending they didn't see the humiliation dripping from his words. My daughter, Sarah, hadn't even looked at me. She just stood by his side, her eyes glued to the floor. That hurt more than anything. I had raised her to speak up for what's right, to value kindness above pride. And yet, when it mattered the most, she said nothing. I poured myself a cup of coffee, though what I really needed was courage. Every sip burned, but not as much as the thought of how far things had fallen apart. Family was supposed to be a place of comfort. But, somewhere along the way, my daughter had traded love for convenience, truth for silence, and I was the casualty of that exchange. The next few days passed like fog. I went to work, came home, tried to keep busy, but my mind never left that house or that night. My phone buzzed a few times, mostly from friends asking how Thanksgiving had gone. I didn't have the heart to tell them. What would I even say? That my son-in-law humiliated me in front of everyone? That my daughter watched it happen? That wasn't something you said out loud. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was betrayal. By the fourth day, I decided to call Sarah. She didn't pick up. I tried again the next day, same thing. My texts went unread, my calls ignored. I started to wonder if Mark had told her not to speak to me, or if she simply didn't want to. A week passed before I finally got a response, a short message that read, "Dad, please understand. It's just not a good time right now. Not a good time." Those words hit harder than I expected. I had been kicked out of my daughter's life, politely and permanently. That night, I went through an old box of photos, pictures from when Sarah was little. Her first school recital, her graduation, the day she moved into her new house, the same one Mark now ruled like a king. In one photo, she was sitting on my shoulders at a fair, laughing so hard she could barely breathe. I remember thinking back then that I'd do anything to protect that smile. Now, I wasn't sure if she even remembered that version of us. Days turned into weeks. The holidays came and went. The world moved on except me. I felt stuck in that moment at the dinner table, reliving it like a nightmare that refused to fade. Until one morning, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, it was my neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, a kind woman in her 60s who had lived next door for as long as I could remember. She was holding a small bag of cookies. "I thought you could use a little company," she said gently. Her smile was soft, but her eyes, they carried understanding. Maybe she had seen something in me lately. We sat down, and as she poured tea, she finally said, "I heard what happened. My niece was at Sarah's house that night." I froze. "What exactly did you hear?" She hesitated. "Mark's been telling people, well, that you've become difficult, that you're controlling, that you embarrassed Sarah by showing up uninvited." My stomach turned. "He said I embarrassed her?" I asked, my voice breaking into disbelief. Mrs. Wilson nodded slowly. "I'm sorry, dear. You didn't deserve that. People can be cruel when they want to rewrite their own story." I couldn't even find words. The idea that Mark was twisting the truth, making me look like the villain, it made my blood run cold. I wasn't perfect, but I'd never once done anything to hurt my daughter. But I knew Mark charming on the outside, manipulative underneath. He knew exactly how to make people believe his side. For the next few days, I tried to ignore it. But word spread fast. People I'd known for years started acting differently, shorter conversations, fewer smiles. and when I bumped into one of Sarah's friends at the grocery store, she gave me a look that said everything. "You know, sometimes it's better to give young couples space," she said softly, as if comforting me. "They'll come around eventually." I forced a smile, but inside I was screaming. That night I decided something had to change. If my daughter wouldn't listen to me, and if Mark was spreading lies, then I needed to find the truth, the full truth. Because something about all this didn't add up. I started by calling one of Sarah's co-workers, Emma, whom I'd met a few times at family gatherings. She liked me well enough, and when I asked about Sarah, her voice grew uneasy. "Mr. Turner," she said quietly, "I probably shouldn't say this, but Sarah hasn't been herself lately. She's different, distant. She comes in tired, sometimes crying in the bathroom. Everyone's noticed." My chest tightened. "Has she said why?" "No," Emma replied, "but it's not hard to guess. Mark's been picking her up from work a lot lately. And once, I heard them arguing outside. It didn't sound good. That night I couldn't sleep. Every scenario played in my head was Mark mistreating her? Controlling her? Is that why she kept her distance from me? I realized the Thanksgiving incident might have been more than just humiliation, it might have been a warning. Mark didn't want me there because I might have seen something he was trying to hide. 2 days later, I drove to their neighborhood. I didn't plan to go inside, I just wanted to see, to know if she was okay. But as I parked a few houses away, something unexpected happened. Sarah's next-door neighbor, an older man named Jacob, came outside and spotted me. He hesitated, then walked over. "Mr. Turner," he said cautiously, "are you Sarah's father?" I nodded. "Yes, why?" He looked around, lowering his voice. "Can we talk for a minute?" Something in his tone made my stomach knot. We stood by my car and he said, "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but I think you need to know. Mark isn't who you think he is. He's been different with Sarah, controlling, isolating her. The neighbors have noticed. She barely steps outside anymore." My heart sank. Jacob continued. "Last week, she came over to borrow something, just sugar, but her hands were shaking. And when I asked if everything was all right, she smiled. But her eyes said otherwise." I leaned against my car, trying to steady myself. All this time, I thought Sarah had chosen to stay away from me. But what if she couldn't? What if Mark made sure of that? Why didn't anyone say anything before? I whispered. Jacob sighed. Because Mark's good at pretending. He's polite in public, generous when people are watching. But behind closed doors, well, it's not my place to say. I just know your daughter isn't okay. As I drove home that night, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly they ached. Every mile I drove, the anger grew stronger, not wild or reckless, but cold and sharp. I wasn't just humiliated anymore. I was betrayed on a deeper level, not just by my son-in-law, but by the silence that surrounded him. And now, I knew this wasn't over. I couldn't just sit back and do nothing while my daughter suffered. For years, I had stayed out of her marriage, believing it was her life, her choice. But now, it wasn't about boundaries. It was about saving her from something that had already begun to destroy her. That night, I sat at my desk and began writing not a letter of confrontation, but a letter of record. I wrote down everything I remembered. The Thanksgiving incident, the rumors, Mrs. Wilson's words, Jacob's warnings. Every detail, every crack in Mark's perfect image. Because I knew one thing for sure now, truth doesn't stay buried forever. And when it finally came to light, I would be ready. That night, sleep didn't come. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the old clock tick in the living room. Every tick sounded like a reminder that my daughter was out there, trapped in a life she didn't choose, and I was doing nothing about it. By morning, I had made my decision. It was time to see things with my own eyes. I hadn't seen Sarah in nearly 2 months, not since that night I was told to leave like some uninvited stranger. But the thought of her trembling hands, as Jacob described, haunted me. There was no peace left in waiting. So, I got dressed, packed my coat, and left early before I could change my mind. The drive to her neighborhood felt longer than usual. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. The world outside my window blurred. The bare trees stood like skeletons under a cold sky. Every street sign, every passing car felt like a test of resolve. When I finally reached their house, I parked 2 houses down. like before. It was too early for anyone to be up, but I saw a light on inside the kitchen. My heart kicked against my ribs. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of her. Sarah. She was standing by the sink, her hair tied back, her shoulders tense. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of something unseen was pressing her down. Then I saw him. Mark. He walked into the room holding a cup of coffee, his expression sharp. He said something I couldn't hear what, but I saw Sarah flinch. Not dramatically, just a tiny, involuntary movement. A flinch that told a whole story. Something inside me snapped. I wanted to burst through that door to pull her away, to yell, "You don't get to talk to her like that." But I didn't, not yet. Because I needed to understand, to see what was really happening when no one else was watching. So, I waited. For 3 hours, I sat in my car across the street. I watched as Sarah got ready to leave for work, as Mark followed her out, talking fast, his hand gripping her arm too tightly before letting go. And as she drove off, I noticed something strange. Mark didn't get in his car to leave. Instead, he looked around, made sure the street was empty, and then went back inside. A few minutes later, a different car pulled up, a sleek black one, and from it stepped a woman I didn't recognize, tall, stylish, and far too comfortable walking up to my daughter's house. She didn't knock. She used a key. My chest tightened as she disappeared inside. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just emotional control, it was deception. Mark wasn't just manipulating my daughter, he was living a double life. For the next few days, I returned. I watched, observed. Each time, the same pattern repeated. Sarah would leave for work, and within half an hour, the same woman arrived. Sometimes for an hour, sometimes for the entire afternoon. I kept notes, dates, times. I was collecting the truth piece by piece. But the truth is a cruel thing, it doesn't heal right away. It burns first. It tears open every old wound before it brings clarity. On the 5th day, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to speak to Sarah. I waited outside her office and approached her as she was leaving. "Sarah," I called softly. She froze, then slowly turned. The look in her eyes, fear, surprise, guilt all at once. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I needed to see you," I said. "Please, don't walk away. Just give me 5 minutes." She looked around nervously. "If Mark sees you, I don't care about Mark," I interrupted. "I care about you. Sarah, I know something's wrong. You don't have to pretend." Her lips trembled. "Dad, you don't understand." "Then help me understand," I said, my voice breaking. "Because right now, all I see is my daughter fading away in front of me." For a moment, her eyes softened as if she wanted to tell me everything. But then fear replaced it. She shook her head. "I can't talk here." "Then where?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Tomorrow. At the cafe near my office. Noon." And then she walked away before I could say another word. That night, I didn't sleep again. I kept picturing her face, the fear in her eyes. Something inside me told me this meeting wasn't just going to be a conversation. It was going to change everything. The next day, I was there early. I picked a corner seat facing the door, ordered a coffee, and waited. When she walked in, she looked exhausted, pale, like she hadn't slept in days. She sat down quietly, avoiding my eyes at first. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, in a trembling voice, she said, "You were right, Dad. Mark isn't who you think he is." I swallowed hard. "What's he done to you, Sarah?" Tears welled in her eyes. "He controls everything. Who I talk to, where I go, even what I wear. He checks my phone, my emails. He says it's for trust, but it's control. Pure control." I clenched my fists under the table. "And that night Thanksgiving when he kicked me out?" She nodded, biting her lip. "He said you were trying to turn me against him, that you were jealous, that you'd never accepted him. He told me if I didn't back him up, he'd make my life harder." I felt something inside me crack. The humiliation I felt that night wasn't just an act of cruelty, it was a calculated move. Mark had used that moment to isolate her from me. She continued, her voice barely a whisper. "And there's more. He's been seeing someone. I found messages. He said it was nothing, that I was overreacting, but I saw her. The same woman you must have seen." I nodded grimly. I did. Her eyes widened. "You've been watching?" Not to invade your life, I said quickly. To protect you. To find the truth you were too afraid to tell me. She covered her face with her hands. I didn't know what to do, Dad. I thought if I tried to leave, he'd ruin me. He keeps everything in his name, the house, the accounts. He said if I ever walked out, I'd have nothing. I reached across the table, took her hands in mine. Sarah, you have me. You'll never have nothing as long as I'm alive. She broke down then. Quietly, painfully, years of bottled-up fear spilling out in sobs that made my chest ache. I didn't interrupt. I just held her hand and let her cry. When she finally calmed, she whispered, I don't want to live like this anymore, but I don't know how to get out. And that was when the plan began to form. We would gather proof. We would document everything. The infidelity, the manipulation, the control. Because if Mark thought he could destroy her and walk away clean, he was wrong. For the next few weeks, we worked quietly, carefully. I met her during her lunch breaks and she showed me messages, screenshots, photos. Each one was another nail in the coffin of Mark's deceit. I also reached out to Jacob again. He agreed to be a witness. He had seen the woman entering the house several times. It wasn't easy. Sarah was terrified of being caught. Every time her phone buzzed, she jumped. Every knock at the door made her flinch. But little by little, she started to believe there was a way out. And then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday evening. Sarah called me in a panic. Dad, he's home early, she whispered over the phone. The woman called and he's furious. He knows something. I told her, lock yourself in a room. I'm coming. I don't remember most of that drive, just the blur of headlights and the pounding of my heart. When I reached her street, I saw her car parked outside and the lights in the house flickering. I ran up the steps and pounded on the door. No answer. Sarah, I shouted. Then I heard Ita crash from inside. My blood turned to ice. I tried the handle. Locked. That's when I heard a voice behind me. Mr. Turner, wait. It was Jacob, the neighbor. He was rushing toward me, panic written all over his face. Don't go in, he said. Mark's furious. He's breaking things. I didn't listen. I rammed my shoulder against the door until it burst open. Inside, chaos. The living room was a mess, shattered glass, overturned furniture. And there, standing in the middle of it, was Mark, his face red with rage, and Sarah crying in the corner. Get out, Mark shouted, pointing at me. This is my house. Not anymore, I said, stepping forward. You lost the right to call it that when you decided to destroy the person who built it with you. He laughed bitterly. You think you can come in here and fix things? You're pathetic, old man. You couldn't even control your own family. Something inside me snapped. But before I could say another word, Jacob grabbed my arm. Don't. He's not worth it. Sarah was trembling, holding her phone. I already called the police, she whispered. Mark's face twisted. You did what? And then sirens. The sound sliced through the air, sharp and final. When the officers came, Mark tried to twist the story again. But this time, he wasn't the only one talking. Sarah showed them the bruises on her wrist. She showed them the messages, the evidence, everything. And when they cuffed him, he still tried to glare at me, like I was the one who had betrayed him. But I didn't feel anger anymore, just sorrow. Sorrow for my daughter, for the years she'd lost. Sorrow for myself, for the pain of watching it all unfold. As they led him away, Sarah collapsed into my arms. It's over, I whispered. You're safe now. She nodded against my shoulder, crying softly. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like a father again. The sirens faded, but the silence they left behind was heavy. Sarah sat beside me on the couch, her hands trembling as she held a cup of tea she hadn't even touched. The house felt colder than before, as if Mark's anger had seeped into the walls and left them hollow. I didn't say anything for a long time. Sometimes words are useless when pain still lingers in the air. The flashing lights outside painted shadows across the room, flickering over broken glass and overturned chairs, the ruins of what had once been her home. When the officers left, one of them had looked at me and said quietly, "You did the right thing, sir. Not many parents get involved. Most wait until it's too late." I didn't feel proud. I just felt empty. Sarah sat there staring at nothing. Her eyes were distant, her breathing uneven. I reached over, gently placed my hand on hers and said, "You're safe now." He can't hurt you anymore." But she didn't respond. Just a slow, shallow nod. That night, she came back with me to my house. I didn't want her to be alone. Not after what she'd endured. As soon as she walked through my front door, something inside me cracked the way she hesitated before stepping in, like she was afraid of being unwanted again. I guided her to her old room, the one she'd decorated as a teenager. The posters were long gone, replaced by quiet walls, but her childhood photo still sat on the dresser, a smiling little girl in a yellow dress clutching a teddy bear. "Get some rest," I said softly. "Tomorrow we'll talk. Not tonight." She nodded and lay down, but as I turned to leave, I heard her whisper, "I'm sorry, Dad." I paused. For what? For pushing you away? For believing him? I turned back, and the look on her face, raw, broken, tore me apart. I walked back and sat on the edge of her bed. "Sarah," I said, "you don't need to apologize. You were trying to survive. That's nothing to be ashamed of." She took a shaky breath, but I could tell she didn't believe it, not yet. Healing never starts the same day the pain ends. The next morning, she woke early. I found her in the kitchen making coffee. Her eyes were swollen, her movements quiet. I watched her for a while before saying, "You don't have to pretend everything's normal." She turned slightly, forcing a weak smile. "If I stop pretending, I'll break." I wanted to tell her it was okay to break, that it's how we rebuild, but I didn't. She needed control again, even if it was only over small things like brewing coffee. Later that day, I stepped outside to clear my head. The air was cold, the sun still weak. That's when I saw Jacob, the neighbor, standing by the fence. He looked uneasy, like he wanted to talk but didn't know how. "Morning," I said. He nodded, then hesitated. "Is Sarah okay?" "She's trying," I said. "It'll take time." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I should have said something sooner. I frowned. "What do you mean?" He looked down. "I knew more than I told you." My heart thudded. "Go on." He took a deep breath. "A few months ago, I heard shouting loud enough that I almost called the police. But then it stopped, and the next day Sarah came over to borrow sugar. Her wrist had a bruise, but when I asked, she laughed it off. Said she tripped on the stairs." He paused. I believed her, but something in her eyes. I knew it wasn't true. And then, about 2 weeks ago, I saw that other woman again. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know if it was my place. I looked at him for a long moment. "You did more than most would have," I said finally. "You were there when I needed to know the truth. You stopped me that night before something worse happened." Jacob shook his head. "Still, I wish I'd done more." His voice carried real guilt. And for the first time in a while, I felt something resembling gratitude. Not everyone who witnesses cruelty chooses to speak. He did. As I walked back inside, I realized that maybe, just maybe, there were still good people left in this world. Days turned into weeks. Sarah began to smile again, small, fleeting smiles, but real ones. She started helping me with chores, cooking dinner, talking a little more each day. But I could tell something was still haunting her. One evening, we sat on the porch as the sun dipped behind the trees. The air smelled like rain. "Dad," she said quietly, "do you think people can change?" I looked at her. "Depends. Change because they're sorry, or change because they're scared." She thought for a moment. "Mark wrote me a letter from the holding center. Said he wants to talk. Said he's sorry." A chill ran through me. "You're not thinking of seeing him, are you?" She hesitated. "I don't know. Part of me wants answers. I keep wondering if I could have done something differently, if maybe I made him angry. If I pushed too hard, I cut her off. Sarah, stop. You didn't make him do anything. That's what abusers want you to believe, that it's your fault. But it never is." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then why do I still feel like I lost?" "Because you did," I said softly. "You lost time, peace, trust. But that doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're human." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for a long time we just sat there silent, listening to the wind move through the trees. The following week we met with her lawyer. The process wasn't easy. Divorce paperwork, restraining orders, financial battles. Mark had made sure everything was tangled in his name. But for once, Sarah wasn't alone. I sat beside her through every meeting. Every signature she made, every shaky breath she took, I was there. One afternoon, as we left the courthouse, she stopped me. "Dad," she said, "thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled faintly. It's not something a father ever does. And yet, I remembered all those years when I'd doubted myself, wondering if I'd failed as a parent, if I'd missed signs that could have prevented this pain. But looking at her now, finding strength again, I realized that even broken things can shine when given light. A few days later, Jacob stopped by with groceries. Sarah thanked him shyly, but he waved it off. "You don't owe me thanks," he said. "You just owe yourself peace." His words stayed with her. She started seeing a counselor soon after. The first few sessions were hard. She came home crying more than once, saying it felt like opening old wounds. But gradually I could see her changing, not back to who she was before, but into someone new, stronger, wiser. One night, she came into the living room holding her journal. "I wrote something," she said. "I want you to hear it." I nodded and she began to read. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. It took losing everything to realize what mattered. I used to think love meant sacrifice, that keeping peace meant keeping quiet. But silence isn't peace, it's surrender. And I won't surrender anymore. I felt tears sting my eyes. She looked up at me, smiling faintly. "You taught me that, Dad. You taught me to fight for myself, even when it hurts." I couldn't speak for a moment. My throat tightened. All I could do was reach out and hug her, a long, silent embrace that said everything words couldn't. But just as the peace was returning, life reminded us that closure doesn't come easily. 2 weeks later, Sarah received a call from the police. Mark was out on bail pending trial. I could see the panic flash across her face. "He's going to come for me," she whispered. "No," I said firmly. "He won't. You have protection. A restraining order. He knows what will happen if he tries anything." But I stayed alert. Every creak of the porch, every passing car made me tense. I started sleeping in the living room again, just in case. And then, one night, the past came knocking literally. A soft tap on the front door around midnight. I got up slowly, every muscle on edge. Through the curtain, I saw a figure, not Mark. It was Jacob. I opened the door. "Everything okay?" I asked. He looked uneasy. I saw a car parked at the end of the street. "Same model Mark drives." "Thought you should know." My stomach dropped. "You're sure?" He nodded. "Didn't see the plates, but it's been there half an hour." I thanked him and stepped outside. The air was cold and still. Sure enough, a dark sedan sat idling at the corner. I couldn't see who was inside, but I didn't have to. Sarah came to the doorway, pale and trembling. "Is it him?" "Go back inside," I said gently. The car's headlights flicked on suddenly and then it drove off. Fast. I exhaled shakily. "It's over," I said, though part of me didn't believe it. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Neither could I. We sat in the living room again, the clock ticking quietly, both of us trapped between fear and relief. "Finally," she said softly, "You think he'll ever stop?" I thought about that for a while. Then I said maybe not. But one day, he'll realize that he no longer controls the ending. She nodded slowly, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something in her eyes again, not fear, not anger, but determination. The next morning, she woke early and went for a walk. When she came back, she said, "I'm ready." "Ready for what?" I asked. "To move on," she said, "to rebuild, to stop living like a victim." And at that moment, I saw the spark that had always been there, the strength of the girl who used to face the world with open eyes and a fearless heart. It wasn't the end of our story, but it was the beginning of hers. The morning light poured through the curtains, soft and golden, washing over the quiet living room. For the first time in months, Sarah was humming while making breakfast. The melody was faint, almost fragile, but it carried something new, peace. I sat at the table sipping coffee, watching her. There was a calmness in her face that hadn't been there before. The bruises were gone, the trembling lessened, but the scars beneath her eyes still told their story. When she turned, she caught me looking. "What?" she said, smiling a little. "Nothing," I said. "Just proud." She chuckled. "You've said that a lot lately." Well, it's true a lot lately. It felt good to see her like this, standing straighter, her voice firmer. She'd started volunteering at the community center, helping other women who'd faced abuse. That was her therapy, turning pain into purpose. But peace never lasts long when truth still hides in the shadows. It began with a phone call. Sarah's phone buzzed on the counter and she picked it up casually. But the moment she heard the voice on the other end, her expression changed. Her eyes widened, color draining from her face. "Who is it?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. She just stared at the phone, her knuckles white. Then she whispered, "It's Mark's lawyer." I stood up, heart tightening. "What does he want?" She listened for a few seconds, then slowly sat down, tears forming. When she hung up, she looked at me stunned. "They said Mark's claiming I stole money from his account. He's pressing charges." I froze. "What?" "They're saying I withdrew $20,000 before I left. That I emptied our joint account and hid it." I shook my head. "That's ridiculous. You barely had time to grab your clothes that night." She covered her face with her hands. "He's trying to destroy me, Dad. He can't stand that I walked away, so now he's attacking what's left of my name." Rage boiled inside me. I'd thought the worst was behind us, but Mark wasn't done. That evening, I sat in my study going through the box of old papers Sarah had brought from the house bank statements. Bills, receipts. If Mark had set her up, there had to be proof. Sarah sat across from me, scrolling through her email history. "He must have transferred it before I left," she said. "Maybe even in my name." Then she froze. "Wait, look at this." She turned the laptop toward me. An email from months ago. One she'd never seen before. It was from the bank, confirming a transfer authorization signed electronically under her name. But the signature wasn't hers. "It's forged," I said. "He's framing you." Her hands shook as she whispered, "He must have planned this, even before everything happened." And that realization hit hard. This wasn't spontaneous cruelty. It was premeditated. We took everything to her lawyer the next morning. He examined the documents, frowning deeply. "If this is real," he said, "it's serious fraud. But we can fight it. We'll need digital forensics, bank verification, timestamps. He might have used your login from his device." Sarah's voice cracked. "He always had my passwords. I trusted him." The lawyer nodded. "Then that's where we'll start." When we left his office, Sarah walked quietly beside me. Her face was calm, but her eyes were full of fire. "He wants a war," she said softly. "Fine, I'll give him one." That was the moment I knew my daughter was done being a victim. Weeks passed. Investigations began. Evidence piled up slow but steady. Mark's lawyer kept pushing, trying to scare Sarah into a settlement. But we didn't back down. One afternoon, I was out in the garden when Jacob came by again. He'd been helping with repairs around the house lately, trying to keep Sarah's mind off things. "You holding up?" he asked. "As well as I can," I said. "Feels like every time we patch one wound, another opens." He nodded. "I get that. But she's strong, your daughter. Stronger than most." I smiled faintly. "Yeah, she gets that from her mother." He hesitated before saying, "There's something I haven't told you. About Mark." I looked up sharply. "What about him?" Jacob sighed. "I didn't want to say it before because I wasn't sure. But that woman who kept showing up at his house, she wasn't just some fling. She's his business partner. And I overheard them once arguing about money. Big money." I frowned. "You're saying she might be involved in this?" Jacob nodded. "Wouldn't surprise me. I think they've been laundering funds together. He probably used Sarah's name to cover it." The pieces started fitting together in my mind. Mark wasn't just cruel, he was calculated. That night, Sarah and I went through her old files again. And there it was, an email chain between Mark and a company she'd never heard of, with her listed as a financial co-signer. Her name had been used to open a secondary account months ago. Her voice trembled. "He's been using me for his scams. The marriage was part of it." I felt sick. "You mean he targeted you?" She nodded slowly. "He knew exactly who I was, your daughter, your business, your savings. He wanted access." The truth hit me like a hammer. Mark hadn't just married her for love, he'd married her for leverage. And suddenly, everything, the manipulation, the control, the lies, made horrifying sense. Sarah covered her mouth, tears streaming down. "I was just a pawn, Dad. He used me." I reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. "You're not a pawn anymore, and he's going to pay for every lie." We brought the new evidence to the authorities. It turned out Jacob had been right. Mark's business was under quiet investigation already for financial irregularities. Our documents gave them exactly what they needed. The detective, a sharp woman named Turner, told us, "You've done the right thing, but stay alert. Men like him get desperate when they feel cornered." Desperate. That word stayed in my head all night. And sure enough, desperation came knocking again. 3 nights later, Sarah's phone buzzed at 1 a.m. A message from an unknown number. Just one line. "You think you've won, but you don't know what I still have." She showed it to me, her hands trembling. "It's him, I know it." I called Detective Turner immediately. She told us to block the number and stay put, they'd trace it. But Sarah couldn't sleep. "He's not going to stop," she whispered. "Not until he's ruined everything." I put my hand on her shoulder. "Then let him try, because now we have the truth, and truth always wins in the end." The next day, Turner called. "We traced the number," she said. It was a prepaid phone purchased in the city under the name of his business partner. "We've got her in for questioning." That was the first real crack in Mark's armor. A week later, news broke that his company accounts were frozen. He'd been caught forging multiple documents, not just Sarah's. Several investors had filed complaints. When Sarah saw the headlines, she didn't smile. She just closed her laptop quietly and whispered, "It's over." But I knew it wasn't truly over. Not until she found peace in her heart. A few days later, we went to court for the hearing on the false theft charges. Mark was there thinner, unshaven, but still carrying that same smug arrogance that once made my blood boil. He glanced at Sarah, then at me, smirking. But when the evidence was presented, the digital signature analysis, the IP logs from his laptop, the fake documents that smirk began to fade. His lawyer tried to object, to twist the facts, but the judge saw right through it. By the time it ended, Mark's face was pale. The judge looked directly at him. "Mr. Lewis, you're not only guilty of fraud, but of deliberate falsification of legal documents to frame your spouse. You have disgraced the very institution of marriage." Sarah didn't move, didn't speak, but tears streamed silently down her cheeks. As the officers led Mark out, he turned once, his voice cold and bitter. "You'll regret this." I stepped forward, meeting his glare head-on. "No. The only regret here is that I ever let you near my family." When he was gone, Sarah turned to me and whispered, "It's finally over, Dad." And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. The next morning, the world seemed different. The air felt lighter. The house no longer echoed with tension. Sarah packed her bags not to run away, but to move forward. She'd found an apartment near the community center. "It's time," she said. "Time to build something that's mine again." I nodded, trying to smile even as my heart ached. "I'll miss you, kiddo." "You won't get rid of me that easily," she said, hugging me tight. "You're my anchor." As she drove away that afternoon, I stood at the porch, watching her car disappear down the road. The sky was orange with sunset, and for the first time, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like dawn. Jacob walked over from next door, leaning on the fence. "She's gonna be all right," he said quietly. "Yeah," I said. "She already is." He smiled. "You did good, Frank." I looked at the horizon, where the last light was fading. "No," I said softly. She did. That night, I sat in the living room alone. The silence was no longer heavy. It was peaceful. I thought about everything: betrayal, pain, justice. And I realized that some stories don't end with revenge. They end with redemption. Because the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's survival. And my daughter, my Sarah, had survived. It had been 6 months since that day in court. 6 long, quiet months filled with slow healing, new beginnings, and the kind of silence that no longer hurt. The garden had grown fuller, greener. The roses Sarah planted before everything fell apart were finally in bloom again, bright red against the morning dew. I often found myself out there, coffee in hand, staring at them. They reminded me of her resilient, scarred, but still beautiful. Sarah visited every Sunday. She'd come with a basket of baked bread, sometimes with Jacob, sometimes alone. She always brought laughter with her, the kind that reached her eyes again. Life had finally learned to breathe again. One Sunday morning, as I was trimming the hedge, I saw her car pull into the driveway. She stepped out, wearing a light blue dress and a smile that told me peace had finally taken root inside her. "Morning, Dad," she said, handing me a cup of coffee from her favorite cafe. I smiled. "You still remember how I like it." "Of course, 2 sugars, no nonsense." We sat under the oak tree, the same spot where we used to talk when she was a little girl. The air was calm, birds chirping in the distance. For a while, neither of us spoke. We just listened to the world being gentle again. Finally, she sighed and said, "I never thought I'd get here, Dad." "Where's that?" "To peace," she said softly. "To being able to wake up without fear, to laugh without guilt. For so long, I thought Mark had taken all that away from me." I looked at her, proud and quiet. "He only took what you let him take, but the rest your strength, your kindness that was never his to touch." She smiled faintly. "You always know what to say." "Not always," I said, chuckling, "but I try." Then she reached into her bag and handed me an envelope. My name was written on it in her neat handwriting. "What's this?" I asked. "Just open it." Inside was a brochure, a modest little flyer from the community center where she volunteered. But this one was special. It had her name printed under a new program. Sarah's Haven, a support group for women rebuilding their lives. I looked at her, speechless. "It's official," she said, her eyes glistening. "We got the funding last week. They want me to lead it full time." My chest tightened with pride. "Sarah, that's incredible." She nodded, smiling through her tears. "It feels like everything that broke me, it wasn't wasted. It led me here." I reached over and took her hand. "You turned your pain into light, sweetheart. That's something even angels admire." We sat quietly again, just watching the wind dance through the roses. But something was still on her mind. I could tell her fingers fidgeted, her eyes restless. "What is it?" I asked gently. She hesitated. I saw Mark." My hand stilled. "When?" 2 weeks ago," she said. "Outside the courthouse. He was there for another hearing, one of his old business partners suing him. He looked different." "Different how?" "Lost. Thin. His eyes were hollow, like a man who'd been eaten alive by his own lies." I stayed silent, waiting. "He saw me," she continued softly. "And for a second, I thought he'd yell, or sneer, or say something cruel. But he didn't. He just looked at me like he didn't even recognize me anymore. Then he turned and walked away." Her voice cracked, and I realized I didn't hate him anymore. That hit me harder than I expected. After everything he did, she said, I thought revenge would heal me, that seeing him fall apart would make it better. But it didn't. It just made me feel sad for him. "Because you have a heart," I said quietly, "and hearts don't forget how to feel, no matter how much they've been broken." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I don't forgive him for what he did, but I forgive myself for letting him hurt me, and that was the true victory." The next few months passed like the turning of pages in a peaceful book. Sarah's program became a beacon for women in the community. She worked tirelessly holding meetings, listening to stories, guiding broken souls toward hope. Every time I visited, the walls of the center were alive with laughter, determination, and quiet courage. One afternoon, I attended one of her sessions. I sat quietly at the back as she spoke to a room full of women, some young, some old, all carrying different burdens. "I used to believe pain was punishment," she told them. "That being hurt meant I'd failed somehow. But pain isn't punishment. It's a teacher. It tells us where we've been, and reminds us never to go back." The room was silent, the kind of silence that meant her words had landed deep. She continued, her voice steady. "If you're sitting here today, thinking you've lost everything, you haven't, because you're still breathing. And as long as you're breathing, there's hope." I felt a tear roll down my cheek and I didn't wipe it away. Because that was my daughter up there, not the broken woman Mark tried to destroy, but the survivor who rebuilt herself into something stronger than steel. After the session, she came over, wiping sweat from her brow. "You didn't tell me you were coming," she said. "I wanted to see the magic for myself." She laughed. "Magic? Hardly. Just a lot of coffee and stubbornness." "Whatever it is," I said, smiling, "keep doing it." She leaned in and kissed my cheek. "I will." That evening, as I drove home, I passed the courthouse. For some reason, I stopped. I sat there for a moment, staring at the steps where so much had changed. It was there that I realized something: life has a strange way of balancing its scales. Sometimes not immediately, sometimes not how we want, but eventually, truth always finds its way home. Weeks later, Sarah invited me to her housewarming dinner, her first home on her own. When I walked in, the smell of roasted turkey filled the air. Laughter echoed from the kitchen, where Jacob was helping her set the table. I looked around the cozy furniture, the pictures on the wall, the warm colors. It wasn't grand, but it was real. It was hers. "Dinner's ready," she called. We sat around the small table, plates full, glasses clinking. The laughter was pure. No tension, no ghosts. Just life, finally living again. As I looked at her, surrounded by people who truly cared, I whispered a silent thank you to the universe. After dinner, when everyone had gone, I helped her clean up. She handed me a plate, smiling. "You okay, old man?" I laughed. "Better than I've been in years." She leaned against the counter. "You know, I was thinking, maybe you should start a group too." I blinked. "Me?" "Yeah," she said. "For fathers. For men who've watched their daughters suffer and still held it together." I chuckled softly. "You think there's enough coffee in the world for that?" She smiled. "Maybe not, but you've got the heart for it." I didn't answer, just smiled and nodded. Because maybe she was right. Maybe healing wasn't just for her. Maybe it was for me too. That night, when I got home, I sat by the window, the moonlight spilling across the living room floor. I thought about everything: the rage, the betrayal, the tears, the triumph. And I realized something beautiful. Justice hadn't come from a courtroom. It had come from courage, from endurance, from love that refused to die, even when life tried to bury it. I picked up a photo from the mantel, one of Sarah as a little girl, sitting on my shoulders, laughing so hard her eyes were closed. That same laughter had come back, and that was all the justice I'd ever needed. As I put the photo back, I whispered softly, "You did it, kiddo. You found your way home." Outside, the night was quiet, peaceful, almost sacred. The world, for once, didn't feel cruel, because in the end, love had won. And that's the only victory that ever truly matters. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most teach us the hardest lessons: that dignity is stronger than revenge, that silence can be louder than hate, and that walking away with grace is the sweetest victory of all. In a world full of cruelty, kindness remains our greatest rebellion, and forgiveness our final peace.